Welcome. I'm Eric Fleming, host of A Moment with Eric Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenteric.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoy this episode as well.
The following program is hosted by the NVG Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to another Moment with Eric Fleming. I am your host, Eric Fleming. So I hope all the mothers had a great Mother's Day. As this episode drops, Mother's Day would have passed. And shout out to all of you all that are out there. And one of the guests that I'm going to have on is a parenting expert. And she is a publisher of a Black parenting magazine. And I hope that y'all will get some idea about, well, at least get something out of her thoughts. Let me put it that way. Dealing with Black parenting, some of her opinions and all that. And my other guest is, for lack of a better term, a hellraiser in her hometown and somebody that I've been following from afar for a while and was really honored to get this sister on. And she's also a proud mom too. So I hope both of those ladies had great Mother's Days. And I hope that, this episode is a nice reward for them too, to hear themselves expressing to you, the listeners, their thoughts and concerns about issues that are happening in our community. So we got a new Pope, and it turns out the Pope is Black. I was just happy enough he was from Chicago, right? But now we're finding out that he's got a Creole background from New Orleans, Louisiana. So welcome, world. You finally got a Black Pope. I don't know if he wears that on his sleeve or not. Probably not. But, Peruvian folks are already claiming him too because he spent 20 years there doing missionary work. So I hope this man, he's 69 and Pope Leo the 14th. Long may he live and serve the Catholic Church well and continue to use that position as a voice for not only Christianity, but humanity. And then some other stuff that we're going to get into later on after the interviews. But I think it's going to be a good show. And as always, I appreciate y'all for listening. And 20,000 is still the goal. We're not giving up on that ever until we reach it. 20,000 subscribers. You can go to patreon.com/A Moment with Eric Fleming and sign up. And it's only $1. If you want some cool stuff, you pay a little more, but we just need to get those subscribers going as fast and as heavy as we can. So greatly appreciate y'all's support and listening anyway. And as always, now it's time to kick this program off, and we kick it off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Eric. 3 former Memphis officers were acquitted of all charges, including murder, in the 2023 fatal beating of Tyree Nichols. Cardinal Robert Prevost, 69, was chosen as the first U.S. native pope, taking the name Leo XIV. A Republican North Carolina Supreme Court candidate conceded defeat after a federal judge upheld Democratic Justice Allison Riggs's victory by blocking the rejection of military and overseas ballots. Rodney Hinton Jr. was jailed without bond for allegedly killing a deputy in retaliation after Cincinnati police fatally shot his son, who they claim was armed during a pursuit. Joseph Shuba received 53 years for killing a Palestinian-American boy and wounding his mother in a 2023 attack tied to the Israel-Gaza conflict. India and Pakistan engaged in severe cross-border attacks in Kashmir following an April deadly assault on Hindu tourists. The U.S. halted airstrikes against Yemen's Houthis after Oman brokered a ceasefire agreement to protect regional shipping lanes. U.S. authorities dismantled a major fentanyl trafficking ring across 6 states, arresting 16 suspects. President Trump announced plans to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status, prompting the university to call the move unlawful and sue over frozen federal grants. The Trump administration proposed offering $1,000 stipends to migrants who self-deport, arguing it would cost less than forced removals. The U.S. government reached a settlement with the family of Ashley Babbitt, who was killed during the January 6th Capitol riot. A federal judge ruled Trump's order targeting law firm Perkins Coie unconstitutional. A federal appeals court denied Trump's bid to end temporary legal protections for hundreds of thousands of migrants. Anthony Albanese secured a historic second term as Australia's prime minister. And measles cases rose in Texas and New Mexico to 769. I am Grace G., and this has been a Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. And now it is time for my guest, Nekima Levy-Armstrong. Nekima Levy-Armstrong is a civil rights attorney, activist, and founder of the Racial Justice Network. Nekima is a former law professor and a former president of the Minneapolis NAACP. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Nekima Levy-Armstrong. All right. Nekima Levy-Armstrong, Madam President, warrior. How you doing? You doing good?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be on your show.
Well, it's an honor for me to have you on. You know, just been kind of following you from afar. And I didn't realize that we had a connection, but we'll get into that as we get into the interview. One of the things I like to do to start it off is I throw out some icebreakers. So the first icebreaker is going to be a quote, and I want you to respond to that. It's a little long, but it says, "So don't get discouraged in this moment, even though there's discouraging news. Sometimes you have to turn off the news and start organizing. There are reasons to be discouraged, but read stories of people who came before us, who in the midst of unjust laws, unjust policies, uncertainty, brutality, murder, and lynchings, found a resolve to stand up, to rise up, to speak up, and to refuse to be refused. That is the real hour that we're in. We're in the place of our power, so let's walk in it." What does that quote mean to you?
That quote is from a speech that I just gave last week at the Minnesota Women's Press 40th year anniversary celebration. And they asked me to be the closing speaker. And so I thought that it was important to remind people of from where we have come, and that this is not our first rodeo as a people with regard to dealing with significant injustices and uncertainty, and that we have to take the long view and not become discouraged or lose sight of the big picture. which is not only our survival, but how do we build upon the strength of our ancestors and those who came before us to persevere and champion the power of the people.
Yeah. Give me a number between 1 and 20.
5.
Okay. What do you think we should decide at the local or state levels versus federal?
What should we decide at the local or state levels versus federal? So, of course, that's a wonderful question because it's something that our nation is grappling with right now in terms of the Trump administration working hard, at least under the guise of working hard, to shrink the federal government and taking a lot of power and resources from initiatives and departments at the federal level that have served people across this country. So I do think that aspects of our government are probably larger than they should be. But at the same time, this requires a more delicate balance than what we're seeing right now. We're seeing someone come in with a sledgehammer when what they really need is a scalpel, because these aren't just policies. These aren't just resource allocations. These are people's lives that are being played with under this current administration, and it's causing so much fear and trauma and turmoil. So I would like to see more local control over certain aspects of what's happening. I'm thinking about, the role of ICE, for example. Depending upon the community, ICE agents can work hand in hand with law enforcement to go into schools, churches, wherever they deem necessary to pull people out and deport them. And it's been happening without due process. From my perspective, local communities should have more control because they know what makes sense in their communities. And a lot of local communities depend upon the labor of migrant workers in order to bolster and sustain their economy. So that would be one example. I think with regards to education, I sort of have mixed feelings regarding, what should be local and what should be federal. And part of that has to do with our longstanding history of the educational system being weaponized against Black children and children with special needs and anyone who is othered, and how historically the federal government has had to step in, even to integrate schools, for example, and to address some of the extreme discrimination, racism, and white supremacy that was happening within the public education system at the local level. So we've seen how the power of the federal government can be utilized to bring about changes that may lead to greater access to equality. But in this instance, the power of the federal government at the educational level is being weaponized against local communities when they're trying to focus on things like diversity, equity, and inclusion, leveling the playing field, and ensuring that there are programs and initiatives in place that give students of color, students with disabilities, and students who speak English as a second language an opportunity for educational advancement. So, it's kind of a mixed bag, from where I sit. But again, what's happening now is just way out of pocket compared to what is needed in this moment.
Yeah. All right. I didn't think we were going to have this conversation, but give me your assessment of the not guilty verdict in the murder of Tyre Nichols.
I think it is absolutely outrageous that a jury could look at the video that we all saw of the abuse, trauma. It honestly looked like reminiscent of what you would see during the slavery era or Jim Crow, in terms of the abuse and brutality being inflicted upon a Black man. And the fact that these were Black men is no excuse. There were Black overseers on slave plantations. If we look at the murder of Emmett Till, for example, which happened on August 28th, 1955, there were, of course, the white men who were the ringleaders of the brutal murder of Emmett Till in Money, Mississippi, but it's also come to light that Black men participated as well. So at times, our people have been weaponized against us when it comes to reinforcing the system of white control over Black bodies, as well as white supremacy. And this is no different. We have Black officers who were supposed to protect and serve and uphold the law being weaponized against a Black man. And now, because the jury didn't recognize Tyree Nichols' humanity, being allowed to essentially walk away from a heinous murder that they committed. So I don't know how the jury could make a decision like that under the circumstances. I think it also speaks to the fragility of our current justice system, or as some lawyers call it, our criminal legal system. Because when you look at what happened here in Minneapolis, where I'm based, with regard to the police murder of George Floyd, some people unfortunately take it for granted that those 4 officers were charged and convicted at the state and federal levels. However, as someone who was here on the front lines and was on the inside of some aspects of what happened as an activist and organizer and attorney, I realized that honestly, one different decision could have caused Derek Chauvin and those other 3 officers to walk away scot-free after committing a murder that we all witnessed on video. So I think that this situation regarding Tyree Nichols and those officers who murdered him highlights the fact that justice is not guaranteed, even with the video, even when there is a public outrage and concern about what happened. There's no guarantee that someone will receive justice after such a horrendous act has occurred that, we can't come back from, right? I mean, as a Black police chief, just a lot of the same parallels as Minneapolis, but, in this instance, we did not see justice work. And it's really disheartening. My heart goes out to the family of Tyree Nichols. I believe he was a father as well. And so it's devastating. And it shows that we still have a lot of work to do and that there is still a need for people to take to the streets, take to the halls of power, and demand the changes that are long overdue in this system and in this society.
Yeah, I echo that. As somebody that's had the privilege to wear a lot of hats, including a law enforcement hat, this was not a verdict I saw coming. And I think the word you used was disheartening. I think that's appropriate on my end too. I didn't see that coming. They some of them are going to do some federal time, but, and I don't know, in Tennessee, if, the burden of proof for murder is different than in Minnesota or in Georgia or wherever. But I just didn't see that coming. So I agree with you. And my heart goes out to the Nichols family and to the Memphis community, especially the Black community, because they didn't deserve that. And yeah, I'll leave it at that from my end.
No, I agree 110%. They didn't deserve it. And then the bigger context around this incident is the fact that these officers, from my understanding, were allowed to terrorize the community as a part of a task force. And so this signals to Memphis police officers that they can literally get away with murder.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about you a little bit. How did a girl from Jackson, Mississippi end up being a hellraiser in Minneapolis, Minnesota?
That's a great question. So I was born in Mississippi, as you just said. And then when I was around 8 years old, we moved from Mississippi. So meaning my mom and my sisters and we moved to South Central Los Angeles. So as you can imagine, that was a significant shift coming from a much slower pace of life. And I would say also maybe more socially isolating in terms of mostly black and white with regard to the racial demographics. Most folks were poor. But when I moved to South Central, it was a different kind of poverty. Back in Mississippi, my mom grew her own vegetables. It just, even though we didn't have a lot, it still felt like a lot. But when I got to South Central, I saw just a different level of poverty in the community, which was mostly Black and Latino community, right in the heart of Crip neighborhoods. And when I moved there was in the early 1980s, maybe around 1984, 1985. And during that time was the start of the war on drugs. So you can imagine what that meant for a community that was already under distress socioeconomically and experiencing a lot of marginalization. The war on drugs just exacerbated everything that was already going on because we had a heavier police presence in the community. We had young men cycling in and out of the justice system, and I witnessed all of this as a kid. And so I remember when I was around 9 years old, watching lawyers on television advocating for people. And in watching those lawyers, I thought about what was happening in my community. And I said, maybe if I become a lawyer, I can help change things. So from the time I was 9, I decided that I wanted to become a lawyer. Now, I didn't know any lawyers. No one in my family had graduated with a 4-year degree. But in my heart, I just knew that that's what I needed to do to make a difference. And so that was the path that I pursued. And so fast forward, when I was around 14, I got a scholarship to attend a boarding school in North Andover, Massachusetts. And it was very academically rigorous, but it also taught me a lot about how the world works because many of the people in the boarding school that I attended had grown up in wealthy environments. So they didn't know much about poverty or people of color. And I didn't know much about them. And so I had to dig into my history in order to be grounded in a space like that. And so that definitely helped set the stage for my focus on civil rights. As a teenager, having to advocate, challenge, people's assumptions and stereotypes about Black and brown people and use my voice in what was sometimes hostile situations. But it also helped to hone my leadership skills and to let me know that regardless of where my family started out or where I started out, I was still capable of competing at that level. And it was really thanks to my Black teachers in LA that I even got that opportunity. They were the ones that, filled out the application for me. I didn't even know anything about the opportunity to go to boarding school, but my Black teachers opened the door. So I felt I had a responsibility to live up to that opportunity. So after I graduated from Brooks, which was the name of my boarding school that I attended, I went on to the University of Southern California, where I majored in African American studies. I was pre-law. And then after my time at USC, I went directly to law school at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And during my time in law school, I found the legal clinic, and I was able to represent low-income people as a law student. And then by my third year, which is your last year of law school, I was able to become a student supervisor. They had created a position for me, and which allowed me to help advise and support my fellow law students in representing low-income clients in and out of court. And so as a result of that, I wound up receiving a fellowship right after law school at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law in Washington, D.C. And that was a 1-year fellowship. Before my fellowship ended, I got a call from one of my former law professors asking me if I would come back to my alma mater, the University of Illinois, and become a visiting law professor for 1 year. And she said at the time that if I accepted the offer, that they would help me get a law teaching job anywhere around the country. And of course, I was shocked at the opportunity, questioned whether I was ready to teach law because I was literally 1 year out of law school. So I was in my 20s at the time. But I felt that it was a door that God had opened. And so I walked through it. And while I was there, I got a call from the dean of the University of St. Thomas Law School. He had been the dean of the University of Illinois. So I was the last person that he hired before he became the dean of St. Thomas Law School in Minneapolis. And he invited me to apply to the University of St. Thomas Law School, which was a new law school focused on faith and social justice. And I figured if I was hired there, that because it was new, I could help shape the direction of the institution and get in on the ground floor. I also figured that they weren't set in their ways, which meant that they would have space for someone like me as a young Black woman, with my background. And so through that experience, when I accepted the position, it was to launch a family law clinic, which I did, representing victims of domestic violence and child victims of domestic abuse and teaching law students how to advocate for them in court. So we took the cases that other lawyers didn't want, 'cause they were high conflict and they were complex. But a couple years in of running that particular law clinic, I had started reading the local Black newspapers here. And when I started reading those papers, I saw a completely different version of the Twin Cities than what had been presented to me initially. Because the Twin Cities has a reputation for being progressive, for being affluent, for being a place where anyone can thrive. That was the impression that I was under my first couple of years. I mean, of course, I'm in ivory tower of academia, brand new multi-million-dollar business building, shielded from a lot of the problems that communities of color were experiencing. But once I started reading the Black newspapers, that's when I saw the truth. That's when I learned about educational disparities, police abuse, and low home ownership rates for Black folks, and on and on. And I remember reading an article that had included the voice of an elder in our community who at the time had been the president of the St. Paul NAACP. And when I read his words in the article, it just had an impact on me. So I reached out to him and I asked if he would have coffee with me. And he did. We met at a local Black coffee shop and we talked for about 4 hours. And he told me story after story after story of incidences that had impacted the Black community, going back to what his grandparents experienced in a community called Rondo in St. Paul, Minnesota, that was a self-sufficient, thriving Black community. And then the government decided to run the freeway through that community, which divided it, and they still haven't recovered. But his grandparents were the last folks to literally be dragged out of the home that they purchased out of Rondo. And that sparked his fight for civil rights. So as he shared these things with me, by the end of that conversation, I said, I'm going to help you. I am going to launch a civil rights legal clinic, and I'm going to bring my law students to the table. Now, at the time, I honestly didn't know if the law school would be open to that shift, but I knew that I needed to be open to that shift. So I went back to the law school and asked them if I could transition from family law to civil rights. Thankfully, they said yes. And so then I launched the Community Justice Project, which is a civil rights legal clinic. And that was the first community justice clinic at a law school in the country. And shortly after that, the dean of Georgetown Law School visited St. Thomas Law School, learned about our clinic. She took the information back. Then they opened a community justice clinic there. And now there are community justice clinics around the country. So through that experience, it definitely took me out of the ivory tower and out of my comfort zone into the heart of issues that impacted the Black community. And the first set of issues that we started to work on collaboratively with the St. Paul NAACP was police accountability issues. And that was back in 2005. So that's how I got started, as you said, being a hellraiser in Minnesota.
So in Jackson, what neighborhood did you grow up in?
So the street that I remember is Edwards Avenue.
Okay.
In Jackson. I attended schools. My grandmother was a cafeteria lady. So, I would attend schools where she was, the person helping to prepare the meals. And then I would also spend time in Terry, Mississippi. So that's where my mom lived, in Terry. My grandmother and everybody else in my family lived in Jackson. So for some reason, I would half the year be in Jackson and half the year be in Terry. Living with my grandparents or living with my mom and my stepdad and my siblings. And so the difference between rural life and city life, that's how I grew up until I moved to South Central LA.
Yeah. So I don't know if you had a chance to check in my background, but I went to Jackson State and I ended up living in Mississippi for like 34 years.
Oh, my goodness.
So I thought that was fun. When I saw the Jackson, I said, oh, we got a connection. And then I grew up in Chicago. So the University of Illinois, we got a campus there, but the main one's in Champaign-Urbana. And, I've had family members go there and all that stuff. So I was like, yeah, we got some dots to connect.
That's incredible. Yeah, I have family members who went to Jackson State, some of my younger cousins.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you've been a candidate for public office, an NAACP chapter president, a law school professor, and the founder of the Racial Justice Network. 1, in hindsight, are you glad that you are not an elected official? And 2, what is a good descriptive title for you?
I think in some ways I am glad that I'm not an elected official, because I would definitely be a lot more restrained in terms of what I can do and what I could say. I feel free and without a filter, when it comes to challenging injustice. And I appreciate that. I also know that I would have had to deal with a lot of constituents who would not have wanted me to bring about the changes that would have been necessary in Minneapolis, specifically around police accountability, which when I ran for mayor in 2017, it was on a police accountability platform, because I saw the handwriting on the wall that if we don't change this and that, we're going to become the next Ferguson, right? Which is something I said publicly before George Floyd was killed. So I think that it was a part of God's plan for me to run, to put the issues on the table, and to give people a choice to avoid what we dealt with in 2020 and beyond. They chose to maintain the status quo. That's what we got. And literally the rest is history in terms of Minneapolis not now just being known as a progressive place, but being a place where George Floyd was murdered. And that will sadly forever be a stain on the city's history. So I'm glad that I was not constrained by what would have happened if I would have become an elected official. I still have people encouraging me to run for mayor or encouraging me to run for Congress, and I say no, each time. I enjoy my freedom and being a voice that is able to use the legal system and the laws that are meant to oppress us as a way of flipping on their head in order to fight back against those injustices. I feel like that's a big part of my calling. And then can you repeat the second? question that you had.
What is a good descriptive title for you?
I would say probably freedom fighter maybe is the best descriptive title for me. It honestly is difficult at times because I don't fit into a normal box, right? So I'm an ordained reverend, right, on top of being a lawyer and the other things that you mentioned, but I don't lead with that. It's just like whatever is in me, it comes out the way that it needs to during the time that it does. So I would say freedom fighter probably best captures who I am and what I do so that it can transcend a title or a position that I'm in. Like, I just feel like God placed me here for a reason, and I just try to embody my purpose whenever I can.
So, what did your health scare in 2022 teach you, and how did it motivate you to continue the work?
So I would say that my health scare really taught me the value of being healthy. Like, that's a form of wealth that I don't think we pay enough attention to or take seriously until you are not healthy. And so I think that I prioritize health a lot more and resting my body a lot more since that experience. I also learned the power of resilience. I think I thought I knew resilience until, going through basically, being diagnosed with a brain tumor, and having that impact my vision in my right eye. And then also trying to find myself again or figure out who am I in the aftermath of this medical crisis. And I feel that I'm still learning who I am, like new versions of myself after going through that experience. But I think my level of empathy is a lot deeper for people who are going through medical issues because I know what it's like. It's hard to explain to people when they haven't been through it what it really feels like. And it's weird for me too, because, I went public with my experience months after I had neurosurgery to let people know what was going on. And sometimes I'll be out with my family or my kids and I'll have people, ask me questions about it or, say, how's the cancer going? I'm like, well, I never had cancer, but it's still kind of weird because if I'm out with my children, I'm not thinking about a brain tumor or I'm just thinking about enjoying my life and being with them, but it's on other people's minds. So, it's like a balancing act in that sense of trying to be responsive when people ask me, but also just trying to protect myself and my family because I don't want my kids thinking about it, because at the time when it happened, I have 4 children. And so my youngest 2, one was beginning their senior year of high school, and my youngest child was beginning, I believe, kindergarten. So I was, thinking about them and am I going to be here, after this surgery? Am I going to be the same person? Will I be able to walk and talk and do all the things? I honestly had no idea. And it's by the grace of God that I am here. And I do feel like I'm still recovering, but I just feel, I don't know, a deeper sense of purpose now that I have recovered to this extent.
Yeah. All right. In November of 2021, you wrote an op-ed for the New York Times entitled "Black Voters Need Better Policing, Not Progressive Posturing." You end the piece saying this: Black lives need to be valued, not just when unjustly taken by the police, but when we are alive and demanding our right to be heard, to breathe, to live in safe neighborhoods, and to enjoy the full benefits of our status as American citizens. That all takes hard work, not just rhetoric, political posturing, and empty promises. So my question to you is, how are we doing so far?
We're probably at a D plus or an F. I mean, honestly, we haven't progressed to the level that we should. Obviously, it's only been, less than 4 years since I wrote that op-ed, which is a short amount of time, in the grand scheme of things and in the grand scheme of our history in this country. But the fact that no real building blocks have been put in place even to get towards that ideal, I think is problematic. And I don't think there's an intention to get towards that ideal. I think that there is an intention to check off some boxes to appease us so that we can keep showing up at the polls, even if, not enough is happening for our community that makes it worth us handing over our vote, during each election. Unfortunately, politics is really more about perception in too many circumstances than it is about bringing about tangible changes, especially for groups that have been historically disenfranchised, marginalized, and oppressed. And that it doesn't matter who's in office, and unfortunately, when it comes to Black folks, because if it mattered that Democrats were in office, we would have had reparations by now, right? We would have had some of the historical inequities be addressed by now, but we haven't. We've had Democrats, unfortunately, playing a role in our oppression, like the crime bill, the war on drugs, and on and on. And I don't know how much hope I have that the political system can bring about the changes that are necessary. Do I think we have to keep applying pressure to the political system? Absolutely. Do I think we need to be intentional about electing people who actually care about our plight, who understand our history, and who are willing to fight for us? 100%. But do I think that the average politician is going to stick their neck out for the benefit of Black folks? No, I do not. We haven't seen it happen often enough throughout history to give me that confidence. We have seen it happen at times, right, where we've even seen some white politicians from during the days of slavery go to the mat to fight for an end to slavery. I'm thinking about Charles Sumner, I think his name was, from Massachusetts, a congressman who actually was beaten, for standing up for us in Congress and fighting for our freedom. So we have had people who've done that, but that is few and far between. Most elected officials, in my opinion, are going to protect themselves at all costs and do what is politically expedient, not what is just and righteous, and certainly not what benefits the masses of Black people. As you said, you lived in Mississippi for over 30 years. As you know, there are certain parts of Jackson that you can go into that are still frozen in time and look like what you can imagine houses look like during the Jim Crow era and neighborhoods look like during the Jim Crow era. And the level of poverty mirrors that as well. That, to me, for the richest nation in the world, is a sign that we're not serious about addressing longstanding inequalities that Black people have experienced.
Yeah, it's just amazing that when Mississippi was in slavery, it was the richest state in the nation. And once slavery ended, now it's the poorest state in the nation. And I think there's a correlation in the fact that percentage-wise, it's the Blackest state in the nation. Mm-hmm. And you would figure that more Black elected officials are in Mississippi than any other state in the nation. You would figure that would correlate some kind of change. And having been one of those Black elected officials, I can attest to you that progress was made. But, it's like when you don't have the resources to back up the commitment, then it just becomes hard. And then people get upset because it's like when people say they want to be self-sufficient. I mean, the phrase Black power literally started in Mississippi, right? It's like, then there's this automatic pushback. We can't allow that to happen. I don't know if they're afraid we're going to turn the tables or what the deal was. I mean, we literally had a member of the Republic of New Africa, evolved to become the mayor of Jackson. And then his son became the mayor. And black folks are still struggling. You know what I'm saying? So,
remember the water crisis that they're just
right. And that
probably still grappling with.
And that was a situation where when the money was coming in, we still had white leadership in Jackson, and that money got pocketed. It didn't go to upgrading the facility. And so by the time black leadership took over Jackson, now the federal government is like, we about to fine you for this. We about to fine you for that. And even when we got the legislature to allow the citizens of Jackson to tax themselves so they could fix it, there were loopholes in there. It's like the white folks had to have a commission and determine, can you spend this amount of money? This is tax revenue that the citizens paid, but some white folks had to tell when they, how much money they could spend out of their tax money.
And the governor also opposed those efforts. Remember, he was trying to negotiate to take over the airport in exchange for allowing the resources to come to people so they could live.
Yeah.
And have clean water, which just makes no sense at all.
Yeah. So it's just like, that's why, having been an activist and been an elected official, I totally concur with you. You got a lot more freedom being out in the street than you do in that Capitol building where I was. But, and that's the issue to me is resources more than anything else. We've got to have, when you're in the poorest state in the nation, you don't have much to pull from, no matter how good your ideas are. But then, if you look at places that have the money, what's the excuse there, right? Other than a lack of commitment. So,
and maybe a lack of commitment and a lack of consciousness could be part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it definitely is the lack of conscience for sure. And that's, let me ask you this real quick, because that wasn't a planned question, but since you brought it up, how do you feel when they say that black folks are the conscience of the nation? How does that make you feel, considering all the struggles that we're still dealing with?
Well, I think that in many ways, that is the truth. Until I always think about the color purple, right? Until you do right by me. I feel that applies, to what we experience in this nation, that America will never be what it claims to be until they do right by black people in this country. And I think we've had people, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, who've alluded to that same notion. We are the folks who are responsible for the building of this nation, in my opinion. Like you mentioned, how wealthy Mississippi was when it was relying upon slave labor. The labor of our ancestors, our people who toiled from before sun up to way after sundown, helping to build the economy of this nation. You travel to Washington, D.C., and you realize black people built Washington, D.C., right? And that's the heart of our government. And so, and not to mention everything else that we add, right? Culturally, our soul that we bring to the table, our spirituality, our creativity, our ingenuity, our sense of royalty when we know who we are, all the things that even when you're driving and using your GPS, knowing that a black woman, created that technology. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of the inventions and things that we have created that have helped the United States be positioned as the number one world power. And we don't get the credit that we deserve as a community. We certainly don't get the resources that we deserve as a community. And we don't get the knowledge that we should have as a community to know who we really are. We're constantly being defined by who white people say we are. And we know that is an anemic version of the truth at best, and really just outright lies, because they write the stories, they write history, quote unquote, and that's what they feed to us but we have to go digging to know the truth of who we are. And the fact that we're still here after all the efforts that have been made to annihilate us shows the strength of our spirit that can't be bought and sold, no matter how hard they try.
Yeah. All right. So let's close this out, because one of the things that you have done always is not only you talk the talk, but walk the walk. So you've written this book called J for Justice. So talk to the listeners about that.
Yes, Jay, my heart is like really into J is for Justice because it's connected to our babies, right? And just understanding that our children are watching, they're listening, they want to participate in our fight for freedom when they're given the opportunity. I think about the children during the Children's March of the Civil Rights Movement and the role they played when Dr. King went into the schools and called them out, because the adults had to get back to work during the times of demonstrating and protesting, and the children took up the mantle. They wanted to be out of school and fight for our freedom, and they did. They faced water hoses, police dogs, arrests, beatings, as young as 8 years old, which is just so remarkable to me. And so, learning about that history was not only empowering, it helped to be able to put it into context as we were here in Minnesota marching and protesting and fighting for justice. Our movement here started, I would say, around 2014. We've been consistent since that time. That was after Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson. That's when we got organized here. And we started to ensure that children could be a part of our activism, showing up at protests and demonstrating. In 2017, when I was running for mayor, I was pregnant with my daughter, my youngest child, who is now 7. So from the womb, she was involved in activism. And, when she was little, we would push her in her stroller and have her march with us in protest. And so in thinking about that experience and the experience of so many other children who were out on the front lines with their parents, marching, chanting, and holding signs, I wrote that book, J's for Justice. And a part of it is to help explain to children about the power of protesting, but also the fact that they're never too young to use their voices when they see injustice happening. So I've taken the book into schools around the Twin Cities, and I've read with children, had them read to me and, chant with me, and also express how they feel about what they're learning through the book and also what they witness either in person or on television with regard to protests and demonstrations. So it's something that's important to me to pass along to the next generation and future generations, for them to have something to refer to that helps them put our struggle into context and to know that they're not just people looking on the outside as children, but they're an integral part of not only why we're fighting, but what we're fighting for, but also the spirit that they have is a part of our liberation. And I'll just conclude with something that I was told many years ago, not just me, but I was on a panel with Taylor Branch, who is a biographer for a number of books about Dr. King and the civil rights movement. And for those who don't know, he's an older white man who was growing up in the South during the time of the civil rights movement. And after Dr. King was assassinated, he started investigating and, writing these books. And one of the things that he said when we were on the panel together was what actually got him involved in writing about Dr. King and the civil rights movement was seeing our Black children on television marching, facing water hoses, police dogs, and brutality. And he said it made him wonder, what is that spirit on the inside of these children? I have to know, I have to learn. And that's how he became who he is. So our kids have had an indelible impact on our history. And they will continue to do so if we give them the space and opportunity to be a part.
So how can people get the book? Excuse me. And how can people reach out to you if they want you to speak or just talk to you about issues?
So people can get my book online. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and a lot of other websites where books are sold. They can also reach out to their local bookstores and ask them to order it. They can order it from my website, NekimaLevy-Armstrong.com. They can reach out to me there or through Instagram. My handle is at Nekima L. And then on Facebook, my name is Nekima Levy-Armstrong.
Well, Nekima Levy-Armstrong, I am again honored to have you on, and I wish you much continued success, not only in the activism part, but also in educating our young people, whether it's at the elementary level, secondary level, or at the collegiate level. I think you are a true godsend. Another reminder that a lot of good things come from Mississippi via South Central LA. And just keep praying that you keep doing what you're doing. And the fact that you're an ordained minister now, it's like, now you truly are a warrior. So I'm honored. I know you've been on Oprah and a bunch of other things. So I'm glad you came on my little old podcast, and I'm extremely honored you did that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast and for everything that you do to educate our people and to bring hope through these conversations and raise awareness for our people. So I pray for your continued success and that doors just continue to open for you and that you're strategically positioned in the right place at the right time always. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you. It's been an honor.
Well, thank you so much. All right, guys, and we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right, and we are back. And so now it is time for my next guest, Janice Robinson-Celeste. Janice Robinson-Celeste is a distinguished businesswoman, author, entrepreneur, and educator with an extensive career spanning early childhood education, nonprofit leadership, and media. As the founder and publisher of successful Black Parenting magazine, a multi-award-winning publication, Janice has dedicated herself to empowering Black families through resources that support their children's growth, education, and well-being. She is also the executive producer of Ethnic Animations and the host of Back Talk, a syndicated podcast that focuses on topics relevant to Black parents and families. Janice holds a degree in early childhood education and a master's degree in business, equipping her with the expertise to lead and innovate in her field. She has held key roles, including early childhood specialist at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia's Child Guidance Center, where she supported parents facing substance abuse challenges. She also served as the school-age child care coordinator with the nonprofit organization Parents Union for Public Schools, and as executive branch director at a multi-million-dollar YMCA, where she oversaw operations and managed the NEYC-accredited child care program and summer camp. Additionally, Janice has taught at several educational levels, including at Hofstra University in New York, where she shared her expertise in multimedia journalism with students. A published author and of multiple children's and parenting books, including Pride and Joy, African American Baby Celebrations, and the toddler board book, Miles' Stuffy Nose, which won the Gold Seal Mom's Choice Award. Janice has received recognition for her work, including awards from Allstate as a Woman of Triumph alongside Patti LaBelle, and the Sarah Award for Women in Communications. Her writing contributions extend to the Huffington Post, and her business plan has garnered accolades with the Benjamin Franklin Technology Award. Janice's passion for helping others extends beyond her professional endeavors. She is the founder of the National Black Parenting Conference, an initiative that brings together Black parents and professionals to share valuable resources and foster community support. She has also presented at events like the National Parenting Conference at Disney and the National Black Child Development Conference. Janice resides in Atlanta, where she continues to uplift her community through her diverse initiatives and leadership roles. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Janice Robinson-Celeste. All right. Janice Robinson-Celeste. How you doing, ma'am? You doing good?
I am fabulous. Fabulous. I told you I just found out the Pope is black.
Yeah. That's a startling revelation. It was one thing to say he's from the United States, but now that we understand he might have a Creole background, we think that's going to spice up the Vatican a little bit, as well as some other folks.
Oh, yeah. It's been confirmed by the New York Times, the National Catholic Reporter. It's confirmed. He is Creole. Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. That's about the closest we were going to get, because I never saw, at least some of the African cardinals were being considered. But yeah, I didn't think it was going to happen. I think the closest I thought I was going to see one was in that movie Conclave. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I did. I recently saw it because of the Pope's death. Pope Francis, I was like, oh, okay, I want to know how this works. And I didn't know it was going to be that good. I actually fell asleep first time I watched the first part. And that's me. If there's no action in the beginning, I'm sleeping on any movie. But then I got back to it and I was like, this is really good. It was so dramatic. So really, really good. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I did a term paper when I was in elementary school about the Catholic Church. So I was kind of familiar with the process and all that stuff. But to actually see it on the screen like that, it added a new dimension to it.
Oh, yeah. I went to Catholic school for 10 years. So we knew, but I didn't really know, all the insights. And that movie really brings a lot to light.
Yeah. So what I like to do to kind of kick the interview off is to do a couple of icebreakers. So the first icebreaker is a quote. So I want to get your response to that. Ultimately, I believe in taking calculated risks, staying true to my purpose, and always striving for the best outcome for everyone involved. That's how I navigate the tough decisions, and so far, it's been a rewarding journey. What does that quote mean to you?
It kind of describes how I lived my life. I've taken very calculated risks, like from the time I was a child on to now. Matter of fact, my family know that I'm a risk taker, and it's kind of defined my life and who I am. Even down to doing the magazine was a huge risk. My uncle came to me one time and I didn't realize how my family viewed it. And he said, he saw me on television is what happened. Once you're on TV, you're real in your family, right? So saw me on TV and was like, Janice, I got to tell you, I got to give it to you because whatever you say you're going to do, you do it. I was like, I guess I do. Okay. Yeah. That's who I am. And I've taken risks that I just say I really have someone looking out for me, bigger than me for sure, because they could have went totally left, but it's always worked out for me. My mom always told me my name was of a God, Janice, Janus, which means open doors. So when one closes, one opens. So I try to keep that in mind as I'm also looking at my life and looking back upon it.
Yeah. All right. So next icebreaker, give me a number between 1 and 20.
28. Oh, 1 and 20. Sorry. I already had it in my head. All right. So let's go 8.
Okay. What is the one thing you hope the new administration will do or not do during their term?
Ooh, will do or not do. Okay, since I don't have any confidence that they'll do anything correct, not do, I just hope they don't hurt people in the process, but that's already been proven to have happened. I hope there's no, and I'm going to say it's going to sound really harsh, but because I know history really well, and I see the playbook that he's following, which has to do World War II and somebody with the H name, Hitler, I'm hoping that it's not going to be a genocide. especially for our people, because I know we're dancing, doing our line dances and, boots on the ground and ignoring the protests. And, and I'm all for that. At the same time, I think we need to be calculated and be ready for anything because we don't know what they're going to do. And that it seems like this country has buyer's remorse after they bought slaves here to build the country, and then they didn't know what to do with us. And thus we had everything from Jim Crow to prison. So they are now looking to deport U.S. citizens. We're not exempt for that. Before when he was president, he wanted to put on the census, and I'm like putting two and two together here, but they wanted to put on the census a checkbox so African Americans can say what country they actually had their heritage from. Of course, we don't know that. Like, we have to go get our DNA, and it's probably several countries, as I know from my DNA analysis. And so the only reason he wanted to do that is to send us back there, if he could. And I said that back then when he was president the first time. And here we are now. You see, he's deporting people anywhere. That's not even their country. He said he's deporting U.S. citizens. He deported a 5-year-old girl because her mother wasn't a citizen, and she is, and her father is. She was sick with cancer, right? So my concern is that when they finish with them, we might be next. And I just hope they don't hurt us. And if I can be deported, I'm like, send me to the Cayman Islands. I have family there. I'll be happy to live there. Send me there. Or Costa Rica, somewhere cool. Don't send me to El Salvador or Libya, and I don't belong. That's what's going on. So I'm hoping they don't do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about School Days when Lawrence Fishburne's character was confronting Giancarlo Esposito's character and talking about going back to Africa. And Giancarlo said, "I'm from Detroit." You know what I'm saying?
Well, so, yeah. Ghana. I think Ghana is gorgeous, and they are accepting us. I don't even mind going to Ghana. I love that. I tend to like the Caribbean with the turquoise water and white sands. I'm like, send me to the Caribbean. That's easy for me. I love it, but I wouldn't mind being in Ghana either. So,
yeah, I think the African country I go to is Mauritius.
Yeah, that's nice too.
Yeah, it's beautiful down there.
Absolutely.
All right. So why and how did you start Successful Black Parenting Magazine?
A long time ago. When we first got started, we were in print only because the internet was not what it is today. It was AOL, dial-up, 1990s. And I was working for Children's Hospital for a program for their child guidance center. And I was a parent educator. So an early childhood specialist. I had to teach parents who happened to be drug addicted in West Philadelphia how to raise their children so that they are well-rounded as possible with their addiction. And as they were trying to get off of whatever drugs they were on. So I worked with social workers and everyone. This one social worker I worked with, she convinced me to start the magazine. I was writing my own articles because I couldn't find articles that were culturally enriched because Parent Magazine, if you're stressed, go take a trip to Disney World with your family. We couldn't do that, right? We didn't have that kind of money. There was no Black representation in parenting magazines at the time. There was nothing on the covers, nothing inside. They didn't talk about our hair. They didn't talk about anything. So she kept convincing me, and I said to her, and she was Mexican. She kept convincing me, and I said to her, if you do this with me, I'll do it, okay? And she did. And we studied for 2 years how to do it and flipped the switch. And we had a print magazine. We decided to do 100,000 copies, sent them out to doctors' offices for free. We did free circulation, got advertisers' attention. Eventually, it took about a year, which was kind of a year too late for us. We were really struggling by that time. They did come on board. Kept it open for like almost 3 years, and then we decided to close it for various reasons. I found some corruption I didn't like in the industry. Missing my kids. I was on tour speaking to different women's groups, African-American women's groups all over the country. I loved doing that, but my kids were little, so I felt like a hypocrite because here I am talking about how to raise your children, and I'm leaving my children with my mom all the time because I'm trying to, and I miss them. So between all of that and the money not coming fast enough, we funded it ourselves. Black businesses are typically underfunded, especially publishing. I decided to close it. So for 20-something years, we lamented about it. Me and Marta, the girl that's helped me start, we were friends ever since. And we said, hey, you know what? The internet like it is now and all our skills, I got photography, web design, photo for everything, video. We could have killed this, And Black Lives Matter started surfacing 2016. And I said, hey, we should have a representation on the internet. We were the first, and I'm going to say it loud, the first Black parenting magazine in print nationally in this country. We were the first, and no one's going to know about us if we don't get on social media right now and have a presence. And I said, you know what? I'll make a little website too. And so I did. Didn't think much of it. Our people, once again, supported us. We always had the people behind us, the community. We started taking off again. And that's been history ever since. And we've been online ever since and may go back to print for print on demand shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when people ask, is this Black parenting magazine racist? You made the argument that one magazine for all cultures is not acceptable. And you kind of touched on that a little bit in your origin story, but just expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we have issues that need to be addressed in our own space. Everything from how to teach your children to deal with the police when they're a teen and they're driving, to our hair care for our kids, to our health. Black maternal health right now is scary. So these are things that need to be talked about on a regular basis, as well as we have some general parenting things too. And we have the Black Parenting Academy right now with parenting classes that are culturally enriched. We have a culture. We took the term Black and made it from lemons to lemonade. And so we are a culture now. We're not just a color. And as we know, we come in all different colors. Pope. Right? We come from the lightest of light to the blackest of black. And so all those representations need to be out there. And so we make sure of that. And so no, it's not racist because we have women's magazines for women. Men aren't supposed to be in there. You have Latina parent magazines and Latina magazine for that culture, and they're not in Spanish. They have their own culture. We have our own culture. And once people accept that it's not about skin color and it's about who we are, who gets invited to the picnic, because we know what the picnic is about and we know what we say during the picnic. Who made that potato salad? We know what that means, We know because we all are connected that way. And as anyone that has been through the African diaspora, this is what Black, the umbrella is. So we're in the UK too, So I'm happy to be Black. I'm proud to be Black. I'm excited. Our culture is like none other. We really got it going on.
Yeah. So I was going to make it 2 questions, but I'll try to combine it. What has made parenting easier in this day and age, and what has made it harder in this day and age?
I'm going to say the internet for both answers.
Okay.
Both answers. It's a double-edged sword, and it makes it easier because parents can look up things quickly and find solutions quickly. We can ask ChatGPT, But then again, it also can put our children at risk, right? It opens the door to the world, the crazy world that we live in that we didn't even know it was that crazy until the internet came along, and exposes our children. We don't always know what they're looking at, and they know this thing better than we do. So they can find stuff, even you block stuff. They're good at it. So we have to watch out for them. Everything from drugs, which happened a lot, especially during the pandemic, that they were able to get offline. We lost a lot of children due to fentanyl poisoning, white and Black. So those kind of things, from sexual predators, those kind of scary things, we have to watch out for. So the internet.
Yeah. My cousin and I were talking the other day, and we were talking about how our children were different than we were growing up. Do you feel that way about your children? And if you do, then why do you think that is?
That's funny. I just had this conversation last night with my granddaughter. I have an 11-year-old granddaughter and my daughter, and I'm Gen X, and we were just talking about the different generations and how they are different. Well, first of all, our kids don't get to go out and play. It's not as safe, right? To just go out and play, depending on where you live. She can't go out. I keep getting notifications on my phone from Citizens app that there's sexual predators registering all around this area. So, and this is a nice looking neighborhood. You come by, it looks great. I'm Gen X. We got to play outside, and then our parents didn't even know where we were, and we were good. They got the commercial. Remember the commercial? I don't know if you know.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Every night at 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? They really didn't, So they were like, she's upstairs, right? Oh, okay. Because we knew to come in when the street lights came on, right? So we knew we had to go in the house. And I would play all day in 4-block radius every direction. We had a hide and seek game that went on for like a good radius, So, and we were like big kids. So we were playing hide and seek for like 4-block radius around us. But that's what's different. Like, they don't get outside. They don't get to exercise. You see them getting plumper, right? Unless they're in some kind of sports from the time they're little on up. They don't get all of that. They don't get to drink out the water hose. They don't get all those experiences that we did. And it made us a lot more independent in good ways and bad ways. But we have to protect the children more so, I think, today.
Yeah, the thing that we were talking about was how expressive our children were when they were more, we were just reminiscing about with our parents, a lot of the things our kids would say or ask questions about. We didn't even think about that with our parents. We were like, it was like, the less they know, the better, the less they know about us, the better.
But they know they can get on the internet and find out.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember my child, they asked me something about gender fluidity, like they were in high school. And I was working for the ACLU at the time. And I was like, I haven't run across that one. I need to do some research and get back to you on that one. But it was like, but they were having those kind of conversations in high school. And so, of course, my dad was like, what's going on? It's like, it's okay. It's like, trust me, our children respect you and your sister and everybody else. You know what I'm saying? It's like, but they just got a different way of expressing it. So.
Yeah, I feel like they're smarter because of it somewhat. I mean, I have a 5-year-old who's, looking up things on Wikipedia all the time, like constantly on his iPad, where I had childcraft encyclopedias, the books, but he's like, he has the world at his fingertips at 5. And I'm like, this is amazing. He's asking me about continents. And I'm like, okay, this is great.
Yeah, I had childcraft. I had World Book too. I think I got my World Book when I was 3. So that was like, yes, I mean, that was that was a whole new world and stuff.
Yeah.
What is the harder assignment for a Black person in America? Being an entrepreneur or being a parent?
That's a good question. It's hard to compare the two, but because I'm both, I'm just going to say being an entrepreneur right now, because Black businesses get less than 1% of any venture capital money in the United States, less than 1%. Banks rarely fully fund a Black business, so you get just enough money to fail. Black businesses come and go so fast because of that. You'll see one on the internet and it's got a great idea, and then next year you go to their website, it's gone. It's hard to exist without support. At least with parenting, hopefully you have some family support that can help you. We have that village. But we really don't have a village for entrepreneurs unless you join something like the chamber. And then it's still not as connected as it could be. Like, you can be an ambassador of the chamber, you can get involved as you want, but that doesn't mean you're going to get what you need necessarily from them. So if you're lucky, you will, but not everyone's lucky. So I think my answer would definitely be entrepreneurship, because it's hard out here for it's hard out here. I had to say it.
Yeah, but just to kind of, I remember I think it was the Fearless Fund when they were trying to, make sure that Black female entrepreneurs had at least some startup money, and people went to court and shut them down,
Yeah.
And they were based out of Atlanta. So I think you're based out of Atlanta too. And a lot of people say, well, Atlanta is different because that's the Black Mecca, and it's easier for people to get started here than anywhere else. Do you agree with that assessment, that it's easier to start a business in Atlanta compared to other cities?
I think Atlanta is friendly to Black businesses and interested. And you really do got to get out there and network. I do. I feel it differently. I started this business when I lived in West Philadelphia, in my house, in my kitchen. And, we won like the Ben Franklin Technology Awards and stuff like that. But far as feeling connected, like and welcome to the city, like, oh, they're doing this thing that's big here. I never felt that. I never felt that. In Atlanta, I felt it. I didn't feel it when we were in LA, but I feel it here. So I think it's more of feeling like you're at home, and, people are interested in what you're doing, want to help. And I think you get more of that here.
Yeah. All right. So what would you like to see done in public policy to make parenting easier in America, or more specifically, the African American community?
Okay. As far as African American, let me get back to that because the first thing I thought about, and this will help everyone, is that there needs to be subsidies for daycare prices. You shouldn't be paying more for daycare than you're paying for your car or your rent, depending on how many kids you have. That is like killing people. You might as well stay home and open your own little family daycare center at this point because it's not paying for women to go to work. And that affects everyone, especially our African American community. But I would like to see some policy get into place where they can find some subsidies for that, and not just a child care credit, because that's not enough. It's just not enough. In America, we have people breaking their neck to try to get a 3% raise when we know inflation over the past decade has been way more than that every year. And we can't keep up. We just can't keep up. I would like to see reparations come into play. Because people say, oh, that was the past. You didn't know anything about slavery. Oh, but we do. We do. I knew my great-grandmother who died in the 70s who was born at the end of slavery. And we know slavery didn't end when they said it was supposed to end. And she can tell you exactly about picking the crops. And then they came sharecroppers, right? And got paid pennies. And still, they didn't have anywhere to go. They didn't have anywhere to go. I knew her. It's in our DNA. It's been proven scientifically that trauma travels down from generation to generation, and we still aren't benefiting like everyone else from the hard work our ancestors made. So no matter what the other people say, I call them the predictable and programmed people. Whatever they say, it doesn't matter because every culture that has been done wrong by in the United States has received reparations. And something needs to be done. I don't care if you let African Americans go to school for free, help them get houses, plus some money, whatever it is, whatever it turns out to be, it should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I just, I always think about the Dave Chappelle skit when we talk about reparations and, the guy driving the cool cigarette truck and all that stuff, but, I think that at the very least, there should be, and I'm glad at least there's some discussions going on, but, and some ideas, and there's some cities like Evanston that's actually taking a step toward it. But, I'm with you. I think, when you see those pictures of all those black men building the U.S. Capitol and we can't get the time of day to even discuss paying us back for that free labor, it's kind of aggravating. And I hope that in our lifetime, we'll see something move on that direction. So my final question to you is, what does freedom look like to you?
Freedom is, number one, important to me. I tell everybody that nothing besides my health is more important than freedom to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I'm not talking about anything corrupt or bad, but just to be able to go where I want to go without people judging me, do whatever it is that I want to do and given a fair chance to do it without judging me because I have extra melanin in my skin. That makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. Actually, the extra melanin in our skin is better for us and everyone else if they had it. It keeps us healthy. So freedom looks like to me just being able to be who I am wherever space I'm in without any judgment and that's free. That's free. And make sure we just have a chance. That's all we ever ask for because if you give us a chance, we usually excel, right? We just need that opportunity. Look, all the different sports we weren't allowed in. Once we got in them, oh God, we just took over because we are not deficient. We are not I want to say it the wrong way, but we are not less than, as people would like us to believe. We know we have great genes. We know we can do the best things. We know we have great thoughts. The only reason that we were held back was because for so long, my ancestors and your ancestors were not allowed to even pick up a book and read or learn. And it was against the law. They did everything to keep us from progressing because they knew once we found out and once we had that knowledge, oh baby, we are going to take off. and possibly leave them behind, which is why we're in the space we are right now, where they are so worried that they're going to be the minorities and we will be the majorities with all the Black and brown people as a collective.
Yeah, that, I tell people the story when my freshman year in high school, my biology teacher told me that my eye color and my skin color and my hair was a dominant gene and all that other stuff was recessive genes. I was like, oh yeah, you can't tell me anything at this point now, so and that's why, like you said, knowledge is power.
Ask yourself, I just want to comment on that, because ask yourself, what in the natural world that's dominant is weak? Nothing. If it's dominant, it's powerful, it's strong, right? I want to go say the other word, but it's strong.
That's right.
It's strong.
That's right. Yeah. But I stole that question from, you were talking to some group about explaining that to children and trying to get children to answer that question. And I know you've written some books, so kind of talk about, as we close out, what books are out there that you've written, and, how can people get a copy of those books? How can people access Successful Black Parenting? And if people want to reach out to you, how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. I mean, I have a plethora of books. The one I'm most proud of is a board book for toddlers, and it teaches toddlers how to blow their nose, because I'm an early childhood specialist, right? So the hardest thing is to teach a toddler how to blow their nose, and it's great for all races, because I've had people who I didn't expect to have it, had it, and they just are happy about it, and they're like, this is the best book. It won the Mom's Choice Gold Seal Award, and it's called Miles' Stuffy Nose, and it's available. All my books are available on Amazon. I also have educational books for parents, everything from how to talk to your kids about sex. It's their ebooks, softback books, paperback, I should say, all available on Amazon. It's just the easiest platform. I'm not crazy about it, but it is Amazon. And I have another book called Big Kid, for when you're feeling small in a big, big world for kids. The kids relate to it more than the parents do. So I found that out because I was looking at it from a child's perspective, and I took it from how we empower ourselves to do public speaking. They tell you to stand big, like superhero pose. And kids love big things, trains, planes, everything. So I made sure I took everything big from dinosaurs on, put it in this book to help them build themselves up so they felt bigger than what they are. And then at the end, it says, I'm a big, big kid. And that all came from a song my daughter was singing to my granddaughter that she made up. And I recorded it, and I said, this should be a book. This is so powerful for her. So that came about that. If you just look at my name, Janice Robinson-Celeste, on Amazon, you're going to find all my books. And I have more coming out. I'm doing one right now on how to potty train your child. So there's all kinds of things that will be coming out from me for the next 6 months. I'm putting out a new softback book pretty much every month now. Okay. I keep saying softback, but paperback. But either way, however you want it, tomatoes, tomato. You want to call it.
So how can people reach you directly if they want you to come speak and all that stuff?
The best way is through our website at successfulblackparenting.com. You can go in there as a contact form. We're also on all social media as Successful Black Parenting. So Instagram, we're most active, have our most followers. We just started on TikTok not long ago. And we are also on Facebook. You can just type in Successful Black Parenting there. We ask people to like and follow and engage. If you engage with us, it helps to keep us around for longer, because our advertisers are looking at that. Even if you don't buy anything, click on the ads on our website, like, comment. When you do that, you don't know how much you're helping a Black business, just engaging and being active. So yeah. I appreciate it if you do that.
All right. Well, Janice Robinson-Celeste, it's been an honor to talk to you and to finally get to meet you. I've followed you on LinkedIn, and I said, I got to get this sister on the podcast. And, cause sometimes people don't understand, but it's a basic thing. As somebody that's been an elected official, I try to explain to people that everything that we do in elected positions impacts people. And, one of the bills I was proud to co-sponsor, because I was real active in the adoption community. I was on a board in Mississippi doing that. And one of the bills I co-sponsored was to give a tax exemption to parents that wanted to adopt children from other countries. And, it's like, but everything that happens, whether it's in the state capitol, city hall, or the U.S. Capitol, it impacts what we do every day. And there are there's a lot of legislation that goes through that impacts parents. And so, when you accepted an invitation, I said, okay, I'm going to have a parenting expert on. And I'm glad that you were able to express some of the important issues that need to be addressed. And again, I'm just honored to have you on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be on and speaking with you.
All right, guys. And we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right. And we are back. So I want to thank Nekima Levy-Armstrong and Janice Robinson-Celeste for coming on. Greatly appreciate those sisters taking the time out to talk to you all, the listeners, about what they're doing and, just the importance again with Miss Nekima, just, the commitment that she has made not only to improve the community through her activism, but also in building leadership for our future. She is a dynamic person. And as you can tell by the interview, very, very humble about it. And as guys would say in sports, I'm glad that she's on our team. Right? And then Janice Robinson-Celeste, just the due diligence to stay with something that she believed in and make it work with Successful Black Parenting magazine. And, her journey in making that happen and just her natural expertise that she is willing to share in that format to help young mothers and fathers become better parents, especially in the Black community. That is always needed. It's always good to have somebody looking out for us. And as I said during the interview, it's like parenting is one of the most important public policy issues that come before government. There are bills every year that impact how we raise our children. And we need to be sensitive to that and we need to pay attention to that. It's like nothing is detached from politics. Let me make that clear. Nothing is detached from politics. Politics impacts every aspect of our lives. The food we eat, the schools we go to, how we raise our kids, and then, of course, the justice system where Sister Nekima works. Everything. So that's why, a political podcast is as important, if not more important, than any other podcast that's out there. And I'm honored and privileged to be able to bring that to you. Now, I do want to close out. We kind of touched on a little bit when I talked with Sister Nekima about what happened in Memphis. And, I'm really, like I said, I'm really, really disheartened by that decision. Reading some of the news reports, they're kind of implying that because, the election happened and attitudes may have soured or whatever toward Black Lives Matter or whatever the case may be, Black activism as far as police brutality and all that could have impacted the decision. I don't know. I wasn't in the courtroom. I just always am amazed that when we catch police officers doing something on video, I mean, it's, Rodney King, and for them to not get anything, that's totally disheartening. At least in the Memphis case, there's federal charges that these guys had to answer to, but, I just can't understand how you can witness that, regardless of the man fleeing, right? Law enforcement, we're trained that it's like, once we apprehend them, that's it. If they resist, we have a right to defend ourselves. But once that suspect is contained and controlled, right, and primarily in handcuffs, that's it. It's over with. At that point, we get them to the station, get them booked in, get them to the jail, and let the court system take over from that point on. We are not Judge Dredd. We are not, on the field executioners of the law. We enforce it, but we're not executioners. And, you got that situation happening, and Jen, literally just like a day before or 2 days before, you had the tragic situation in Cincinnati where a distraught father allegedly ran over a police officer and killed him because his son was killed by the police the day before, right? And there's questions about whether the young man was armed or not. He was one of 4 suspects involved in a car theft. And it's tough, having been on that side, dealing with law enforcement, having been an elected official, having worked for the ACLU, I can honestly say I've seen all sides of the issue, and I have advocated for the right things on either side of the issue. And when we were wrong on the ACLU side, we squashed that. When you're wrong on the law enforcement side, you voice your opinion and you let it be known. And especially during training, because that's when you're supposed to get all the bad habits out. The instructors are supposed to pick up on things and say, hey, no, that's not how we do that. You need to get yourself out of that situation. We're going to put you in stressful situations, but our goal is to teach you how to handle that stress without causing unnecessary harm, right? You're trained in weapons. You're trained how to use those weapons properly. You're trained how to handle situations properly. And they're going to put you in stressful situations so they can feel confident that when you get out there, that you're going to follow that training. And what we saw in Memphis didn't happen. Jury's still out on what happened in Cincinnati, whether it was justified or not. All things tendency-wise, it looks like they're going to rule that a justifiable homicide in the case with Mr. Hinton's child. But, we're living in a very, very perilous time. And no matter how you really feel about what Mr. Hinton did, for those of y'all in law enforcement, I want you to understand this is a real thing that we have to deal with. And we may not know when we'll be the target, right? And I say that even though I'm not active in law enforcement anymore. I'm still connected, right? I still have friends that are doing this kind of work. And so, and the majority of the people that are living in this society are good and decent people, but everybody has a breaking point. And it seems like in our politics and in all aspects of our lives, it seems like there are people that are hell-bent on pushing folks to that breaking point. And although there's nothing really I can do, all I can attempt to do is encourage people to stop engaging in that behavior. As long as X is out there, there's going to be a voice for those people, as long as we have the internet, as Miss Janice pointed out, we just going to have to be careful about what we and our children are exposed to. That's just where we are. And I really hope that people would stop, or at least the number of people doing bad behavior and or acting badly would decrease. But, when we have leaders acting that way, it's kind of hard for other citizens not to behave or use that example, right? I mean, it's even to the point now where it's like we want to elect people that act like that and vigorously defend that. So, but we're in a perilous time, and I'm of a faith practice where whatever happens, whatever you do, you'll have to be accountable for it. And even though in the case in Memphis with Tyre Nichols, justice was not totally served for them. They went through the process, and, the defendants got the verdict they wanted, which is the argument for due process, right? What we're dealing with these immigrants that are being deported without due process, give them a chance to prove it. You're saying that they're members of a gang. You're saying that they beat their wives. Let them do it in court and see what a judge or a jury would say. In immigration issues, it's the judge, right? So, due process did happen. I'm not happy with the outcome, but, I just know that when you do something like that, you're going to pay for it one way or the other. So that's all we can do at this point, and just try to encourage people to do better, to behave better, and to get and elect leaders who will demand that kind of accountability, not only in law enforcement, but the community at large. It's time to set better examples. Banging a gavel 50 times is not leadership. Cussing out constituents that have legitimate concerns or demeaning them, whether you're on an elevator or at a town hall meeting, that's not leadership. This country needs leadership, and I've made this appeal, and I continue to make it. We need American leaders, and American leaders respect their constituents, regardless of whether they agree with us or not. Leaders respect people's opinions. And, we just got to get back to that. Human life is valuable. It means something. And no matter what role we play on this planet, we have to carry that mindset with us. So that's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for listening. Until next time.
NBG Podcast Network.